Welcome back to the Tomatodito Boxing Show, and on today's episode, we're going to dive into a 130-pound fight that took place just a few days back. And man, that 130-pound division has been on fire as of late, and we have more to come. We have Oscar Valdez fighting Liam Wilson, who ended up in that crazy back and forth firefight with Vaquero Navarrete last year. Oscar Valdez is going to be fighting Liam Wilson now and taking on that challenge, and that's a tough fight for both of them. It's a you pick 'em type of fight. The long, lengthy, taller fighter in Liam Wilson, heavy-handed Liam Wilson against more of the traditional style of boxer, sometimes boxer brawler in Oscar Valdez, but yet the more experienced fighter in Oscar Valdez. That's going to be a fun fight. And then from there, you got the champions all basically active. You got Lamont Roach, which recently crowned himself as the champion. And then you have Vaquero Navarrete, who's going to be moving up and fighting Baranchyk at 135 pounds for a vacant WBO title there. And he's still, apparently as of now, he's still holding his title at 130 pounds secure. And then another champion that's going to be active is Joe Cordina. He's going to be fighting Anthony Casacci. And his title, there was also stakes these past few days for his title and who the mandatory is going to be. Knocking on his door, on Joe Cordina's door. And last but not least, the fight we're going to talk about today is O'Shaquie Foster against Abraham Supernova. And this is a fight where it could have very well, just on paper and knowing these two fighters, it could have very well turned out to be like a Jermaine Ortiz, Teofimo Lopez type fight, but it didn't. The fact that these are two fast-footed, fast-handed fighters, it could have lent itself to be either like the Teo Jermaine Ortiz or like the Shakur and Edwin de los Santos type fight. Yet the styles contrasted themselves very well and they played out very well. A fan favorite style fight that these two fighters put on, a great show that they put on for the crowd. And you have Nova, Abraham Nova, who is an explosive, quick-footed, fast-handed, heavy-handed fighter at that, and with very good boxing pedigree. And if you guys remember the last time that we saw Nova, I mean, we've seen him, obviously, he's on a 2-fight win streak coming into this fight, but where we really got a notion of who Abraham Nova was and how he fought was in that back-and-forth firefight that he had with Robeisy Ramirez back at 126 pounds. Prior to Robeisy Ramirez becoming champion, he would go on to become champion a couple of fights later against Isaac Dogbe. But that was a fight where Nova, that's the first loss of Nova's career, and it's a fight where Robeisy Ramirez also introduced himself into the boxing scene, into the homes, I guess, and became a household name with that victory over Abraham Nova as he stopped him in the 5th round. Abraham Nova is an explosive fighter, quick, agile, and has good pop behind his punching. O'Shaquie Foster is a very consistent fighter with good stamina, delivers very well, very accurate, very efficient, and takes the action to his fighters. If you remember O'Shaquie Foster, this is the 2nd or 3rd time that he's been defending this title now. And he ended up winning the title against Ray Vargas. Ray Vargas, who's another champion at 126 pounds, a WBC champion at 126 pounds. Ended up moving up to 130, kind of like what Navarrete is doing right now, trying to become a double champ or a champ in the 2nd division. Well, Ray Vargas dared to do that at 130 pounds when that title was vacated by Shakur Stevenson. Moves up, O'Shaquie Foster happens to be his opponent, and it was a great fight where O'Shaquie Foster ended up basically outpointing Ray Vargas throughout the fight and ended up crowning himself the WBC champ of the 130-pound division. A title that Oscar Valdez lifted from Miguel Berchelt by stopping him. Then we get Shakur Stevenson taking the title from Oscar Valdez, vacating, and enter the era of O'Shaquie Foster. Since that fight with Ray Vargas, he would go on to defend it against Rocky Hernandez, which is a fight I was just mentioning. A fight in which it was so tight and so so heavily contested by both fighters where momentum shifted multiple times during that fight, and it came down to a crazy 12 round, which easily ended up nominating this fight for Fight of the Year last year. This fight took place late October. It got nominated for Fight of the Year. If anything, the round got nominated. The 12 round got nominated for Round of the Year. Crazy ending to that fight where O'Shaquie Foster ends up pulling out the stoppage over Rocky Hernandez and secures his title, defends his title successfully. That was the first defense of the WBC belt. And this was his second defense against Abraham Nova. So O'Shaquie Foster gets the split decision win over Nova, a fight in which, like I said, the styles of these two fighters could have very well lent for a boring fight, for a dull fight. They could have canceled each other's abilities, yet they showed up to fight. They showed up to box one another, outpoint one another, and fight. Abraham Nova took the fight to O'Shaquie Foster, and O'Shaquie Foster answered the call. The stamina, the consistency, the body of work that O'Shaquie Foster does is he's just a blue-collar style fighter where he continues to walk you down, and he's a very good counterpuncher as well. So he was having a lot of success with Abraham Nova whenever Abraham Nova would fight on the front foot and lunge in or initiate an attack. O'Shaquie was able to counter him with great success. And then he was able to take the fight to Abraham Nova throughout the entire fight, pushing the pace, actually infiltrating the distance, eliminating the distance that Abraham Nova had. Anything that Abraham Nova was trying to generate, O'Shaquie would move in on. Imposed the style, imposed the skills, and had Abraham Nova on the back foot throughout the fight. And whenever Nova would end up lunging in, his plan was basically falling apart, his game plan. He would lunge in, and O'Shaquie Foster also had answers for him. This is not to say that it was a one-sided fight. Not at all. If you saw the fight, if you didn't see the fight, go watch it. If you saw the fight, it was a great back-and-forth fight where both fighters were hitting each other and connecting on one another. But you could tell that Abraham Nova became frustrated throughout the fight, and you would notice it on different spurts of the fight. And Abraham Nova, instead of having a consistent body of work like O'Shaquie Foster presented, Abraham Nova would fight in spurts. He would lunge in, throw combinations, 4 or 5 punch combinations, 3 punch combinations, and at times would end up landing power punches and successfully landing at that on O'Shaquie Foster, whereas O'Shaquie Foster would continue his pace. He set the pace, he maintained a rhythm, and didn't let off, didn't take his foot off the gas. And if he got hit, he was pushing the action to Abraham Nova and trying to get back, get those hits back. And in the end, it translated in a split decision win. It was a tighter fight on the scorecards than maybe we saw. We saw Abraham Nova trying to come back and come on late. But it was a little bit too little, too late. If you look at the CompuBox stats, O'Shaquie Foster ended up landing an overall 139 punches at a 32% accuracy rate out of 429. So 139 of 429 punches, 32% for O'Shaquie Foster, whereas Abraham Nova ended up landing 122, so 17 punches less than Foster, and threw a total of 701 punches. He landed at a 17% accuracy rate. That's what made for the entertaining fight, where he was just throwing punches and bunches. We just covered an episode. An episode 1 or 2 episodes ago, where I end up covering the Jojo Diaz fight, which also happened a day prior to this fight taking place. Jojo Diaz against a Jesus Perez, a journeyman style fighter in Jesus Perez, heavy-handed, strong puncher, who ended up throwing on the upside of 800 punches, and that ended up catching the eye of Navarrete, who ended up swaying the decision on the way of Jesus Perez, basically by landslide. And it was the output that was judged and scored for Jesus Perez rather than the accuracy. Here we are again, where this came down to a split decision, and one of the judges had it for Nova, and that judge could very well have been impressed by the output and the amount of punches that Abraham Nova threw at O'Shaquie Foster. Split decision win. O'Shaquie Foster defends his WBC title, and something of note, something that occurred during the fight, which was commentated on, and then O'Shaquie Foster goes on to talk about it in the post-fight press conference or some post-fight interviews that I saw. O'Shaquie Foster ends up coming away with an injury where he has to go get it checked out. His bicep was injured, and that happened in round 5 of the fight, as O'Shaquie ended up throwing an overhand right. Abraham Nova came up with his left arm blocking high with his elbow sticking up in the air, and O'Shaquie's bicep landed right on the elbow. That also ended up causing problems for O'Shaquie Foster. It was noted by the commentators of the fight, and O'Shaquie Foster ends up talking about it as well in the post-fight interview, where his bicep was injured, and he just couldn't let it go after that with the same amount of accuracy and the same amount of output that he had been unleashing that hand earlier in the fight. So that ended up hindering him. Another story of the fight was down the final stretch of the fight, where O'Shaquie Foster ends up catching Abraham Nova. This was a story of, like we said, the outbursts, the speed and the power of Abraham Nova, the explosivity of Abraham Nova against the consistency and the steady body of work that O'Shaquie Foster presented. One thing that ended up being very notable was the stamina. Stamina played a huge part in this, and you saw Abraham Nova start to get sloppy down the final stretch of the fight, even though he was lunging forward and trying to catch with that one home run punch, catch O'Shaquie with a knockout punch. O'Shaquie stayed consistent, stayed calm, stayed the course, and the stamina ended up also being a huge factor for O'Shaquie Foster having pulled off this victory. O'Shaquie Foster, with the stamina, successfully lands a sneaky left uppercut on Abraham Nova as Abraham Nova lunged forward. Both fighters found themselves parallel to the ropes. O'Shaquie ends up sneaking in his left uppercut amidst an exchange between the two fighters and drops Abraham Nova, to which Abraham Nova complains that it was a slip, that it wasn't a knockdown, and that knockdown, that 10-9, 10-8, could have very well been the difference in some of these judges. Actually, it looks like it was the difference, since the fight was being scored so tightly by 2 of the 3 judges. He knocks down Abraham Nova down the final stretch of the fight, and then they have another exchange in which Abraham Nova, you could just see his legs just having left him. He was wobbly-legged. He's stumbling all over the ring, where he's visibly complaining and having outbursts that he's slipping all over the ring. Yet it was a combination. Maybe there was some slippage. Maybe the ring was slippery and the canvas was slippery. But more so than anything, his legs were gone. His legs were gone. And it's because of the way that he fights. He fights in bursts. And that takes a lot of energy. The way that the explosivity that Abraham Nova presents each and every fight spends a lot of energy. He expends a lot of energy, and of course it's going to exhaust him. He throws hard. He throws with a lot of power, and these are like sprints that he's doing. Full force sprints every time that he's lunging a combination attack or initiating an attack on his opponents, where of course those speed bursts are going to be gassing him down a lengthy contested fight, such as the one that he found himself in against O'Shaquie Foster. In fights where shorter fights, not championship fights, but in a 10-round fight or an 8-round fight, he's able to last. But this also happens to leave him exposed going forward, Abraham Nova needs to address that, because it also leaves him exposed, and he could potentially run into another issue like when he ran into Robeisy Ramirez and got stopped in the 5th round. He exposes himself by attacking so wide punches, looping punches, overhand punches, and often finds himself exposed. And that's basically what was happening here, where we started seeing him just get frustrated, never really able to set his game plan in motion to find his rhythm. So he was just piecing the fight together as he went, found a lot of success in doing so, but he never really got to interrupt O'Shaquie's pace and rhythm. So therefore, he would resort to the speed burst and the explosivity and the overhand punches and the power punches. And even then, O'Shaquie continued to have success by catching him on the front foot or initiating the attack and forcing Nova to fight on his back foot. Again, O'Shaquie Foster defends his title for the 2nd time. He's calling out for the winner of Oscar Valdez, Liam Wilson. He's also asking to fight Lamont Roach, who recently became a champion at 130 and lifted that title from Hector Garcia. He wants to fight with Navarrete, but understands that Navarrete is moving up to 135, or at least challenging for the vacant 135 WBO title against Berinchik. So that leaves him with, in my opinion, maybe Joe Cordina, but Joe Cordina's busy already. He's already got a dance partner in Anthony Casacci, who's the IBO champion at 130. So that leaves him with, in my opinion, Lamont Roach. He could easily start negotiations if his bicep didn't suffer any major injury. He could definitely start negotiations with Lamont Roach. Remember, when we covered the Lamont Roach episode, as he lifted the title from Hector Garcia and shocked the 130-pound division, he went into that fight as a free agent. He is no longer a Golden Boy boxer. So as a free agent, that fight will be fairly easy to make, especially now that O'Shaquie Foster is backed by Bob Arum in Top Rank. Leverage will be on his side as a champion, but I'm sure they'll be able to come to decent terms with Lamont Roach, where he would be willing to give it a shot at unifying titles at 130 pounds. That would be an excellent fight if we're able to get O'Shaquie Foster and Lamont Roach. Meanwhile, while they wait for everything for the dust to settle, whether Navarrete becomes champ at 135 and ends up vacating and remains at 135, and then to see what happens with Oscar Valdez and Liam Wilson. See how that fight goes and who the bigger name would be. Obviously, O'Shaquie Foster is looking for a bigger purse, for a bigger payday, and a bigger name on the resume. But he's got a solid resume already to date. I mean, he's got names just in the last few fights, right? Ray Vargas, Rocky Hernandez, Abraham Nova. Yakubov seems like he's going to be the mandatory, and that's a prior opponent of his. One that he defeated back in 2022, and he was an undefeated fighter at that time, and it looks like he might be the WBC mandatory once again. Mohamed Yakubov. Who else does he have? Miguel Roman in his resume. Jesus Bravo. I mean, he's got some great names to date. Rolando Chinea, who he actually lost a split decision to. Samuel Taya, he also has a loss to Samuel Taya. That was early in his career in 2015. Great names, great body of work, great resume by O'Shaquie Foster. Let's push for O'Shaquie Foster, Lamont Roach. That will be a great fan favorite style fight where both fighters have similar styles as far as the way that they box. It would be a matter of who's going to impose whose skills on the other. Similar to what we just saw with Abraham Nova. Lamont Roach likes to take the fight to his opponents, and we saw it against Hector Garcia. He's not as refined of a boxer as Hector Garcia was, but the power ended up paying off huge dividends for Lamont Roach in that fight, and he possesses good pop. For O'Shaquie Foster, same thing. He doesn't abandon his game plan. He sets the pace, sets a good rhythm for himself, and takes the action. He loves to fight. He loves to engage. He loves to get in there and mix it up and vary his attack, but very consistent, very accurate, and that would be a great fight where it would possibly be a fight of the year. I don't see that being a dull fight whatsoever. Lamont Roach is never in any dull fights, and neither is O'Shaquie Foster. So that would be a great fight. So 130-pound division in full swing, in full motion, and what an exciting fight that this was. Congratulations to O'Shaquie Foster. I've been following him since I first caught wind of him on Ring City USA, which was an NBC show that had a short lifespan. And that's where I first saw him, and he fought Miguel Roman in that fight. And ever since then, I've been keeping track and keeping tabs on O'Shaquie Foster, and I'm excited to see where his career goes on from here. I think he'll probably have 1 or 2 fights at 130 pounds, hopefully big names, hopefully he unifies, and then more than likely we'll be seeing him migrate north to 135 pounds, where that division is starting to build up once again. Now that we have Keyshawn Davis as one of the stronger contenders there, we have Lomachenko and Camboso still campaigning there. So that's gonna be a fun one, a fun division when O'Shaquie Foster ends up joining it, especially if Navarrete ends up going there and beating Berinchik for that WBO title. Great fight, O'Shaquie Foster. For Abraham Nova, well, he's gonna be a tough test for anybody. He's going to be a tough test for anybody, similar to like a Liam Wilson is right now. And he's going to pull off an upset on anybody who shows up not on their full guard. Abraham Nova is that good, that explosive, that good, with good pop. We've seen him in the past, and obviously this is the second loss of his career, but he fell short on his title attempt. But it doesn't mean that he won't be a champion. He's a really good boxer, really good fighter himself. And Abraham Nova, hopefully we get him into some good fights. He would be fun to see against Navarrete because of their styles, how explosive he is, versus a heavy-handed fighter in Abraham Nova versus a heavy-handed puncher in Navarrete. That would be a fun fight to see. So congrats to O'Shaquie Foster once again, the WBC champ. Second defense of his WBC reign, and can't wait to see him. Let's push for Lamont Roach and O'Shaquie Foster. I'll catch you guys all in the next episode, and thank you once again for tuning in and for all the love and support that you continue to send my way. Take care of yourselves. Have yourselves a good night.